Let's go! Marcus Freeman is being interviewed. Our number one defensive coordinator candidate might actually happen. I do have some bad news about my number one offensive coordinator candidate, but there is an interesting name that is being interviewed as we speak. So go on ahead, subscribe to the channel. We got some player roster news coming up as well. Let's go. Road to 3K. Let's go. So One Team, One Podcast, a pretty fun LSU account, reports Jake Peetz, the quarterback coach at the Carolina Panthers, is going to be interviewed. It was confirmed by 247 and some national NFL accounts. They would also bring over DJ Mangas. So the connection here is obviously Joe Brady with the Carolina Panthers, and Ed Orgeron has actually relied on Joe Brady during this coaching search, and this is, of course, who Joe Brady recommends. And, of course, DJ Mangas was an LSU analyst during the 2019 National Championship team. Now, this is also very important. This tweet is from 2018. Though Jake Peetz, or Peetz, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but though he hasn't been the offensive coordinator, it looked as if he would have gotten the offensive coordinator had Josh McDaniels actually taken the Colts head coaching job. Instead, Jake Peetz was hired to be an Alabama offensive analyst. So here he is, obviously a very young guy, and a guy that fits the same profile as a Joe Brady. So we go here, and this is obviously a joke. He is not yet the offensive coordinator for the LSU Tigers. This is why you can't trust everything that is on Wikipedia. But I do go here to show you the Jake Peetz coaching profile. Santa Barbara City College in 2006. As you can see here, he is only 37 years of age. And you can also see that he's made a lot of stops at both the college and NFL level. UCLA, the Jacksonville Jaguars, Alabama, the Washington football team, Raiders, Alabama again, Carolina Panthers running backs coach, and the quarterbacks coach for Carolina. So as you can tell, a wide range of offensive positions, but one thing you don't see here is offensive coordinator. So that's why that report from Ian Rappaport is very important, because Peetz would have been the offensive coordinator had McDaniels ended up taking that Colts job. But if McDaniels had taken that Colts job, McDaniels would have called the play. So this is an offensive coordinator who has not yet called plays anywhere. As you can see here, no offensive coordinator experience, and that is also true with super-duper hotshot DJ Mangas. And as you can tell, LinkedIn could be a mess of a social media platform. And we went through DJ Mangas's LinkedIn, and the same thing is true. Never actually a coordinator, but he is in his 30s, and he's also very young. And remember, LSU is on a budget. So if they're going to get Marcus Freeman, that's going to be the most expensive name, which doesn't leave you with as much funds to hire a new offensive coordinator, which makes DJ Mangas and Jake Peetz a more affordable and potentially very prosperous team to go along with Russ Callaway. Cincinnati defensive coordinator Marcus Freeman is expected to interview for the LSU defensive coordinator job this week. Brandon was the first to report it, and I believe Shea reported, and a few others have reported that his wife will also be flying into Baton Rouge to get this interview. Now, let's actually talk about this because it is very important. Marcus Freeman spoke to 247's Brandon Marcello, and he said that he wants to be a head coach one day. Now, obviously, he's in his mid-30s, and you take a look at the stats here. He was number one in yards per play. That changed after the Georgia game. They dropped down to fourth in the country in yards per play, which is obviously pretty freaking ridiculous. as we pointed out in our defensive coordinator piece, by the way, our coordinator coaching search pieces are all down below if you want to read them or watch them. Cincinnati being so great on yards per play is pretty impressive considering their offense was pretty good and played at a relatively fast pace. So Iowa, for instance, they're pretty good on yards per play, but they also have a slower paced offense, which means that they don't play as many plays, which means their defense is more well-rested throughout the course of a game. So their yards per play being at 4.34 is really good, but it's also easier. Cincinnati, it is hard to have a good yards per play when you have a good offense. You saw that with the 2019 LSU team. Dave Aranda's defense looked like it was worse, but they were actually just playing more plays, which is why they got tired quicker and so on and so on. So Marcus Freeman really is a real deal. But this is what concerns me. I do believe LSU should not be married to the idea that they must run a 4-3. Don't do that. I just think personnel can switch back and forth a lot quicker, and it's more important to have your scheme right than your actual personnel right, because we saw last year the scheme was so awful, LSU allowed 8 of the 10 teams they played against to average 7 yards per play. Now take a look at this, all right? You see these yard per play metrics, all right? LSU is all the way down here at 125th, okay? But that's not the important number. The important number is 7, okay? So there was only 4 teams this year in college football that allowed 7 yards per play on average. LSU allowed 8 of the 10 teams that they play average 7 yards per play throughout the course of a game. So what does that tell you? That LSU was not only bad overall, that they were bad in every single game that they played outside of Texas A&M, who's a decent team, and Texas A&M, really good team, and Vanderbilt. So they only had one really good outing out of 10, and in theory 9 because Vanderbilt was so daggum awful. So you've got to revamp everything, and how many great defenses out there even run a 4-man front anymore? I don't know. So obviously if you're at Orgeron, don't be married to the idea, because this guy, Marcus Freeman, is the hottest coordinator name out there. He's been linked to Auburn, Texas, and Notre Dame. All 3 of those schools have as good of resources as you do. So if you really want him, which you should because he is really good, let him do his own thing and you be the game manager role. All right? So that is something to keep in mind as we go through this coaching search. And some good roster management discussion here. Obviously, Glenn Logan announcing that he is coming back to LSU. And this is a really good thing. Obviously, you heard over the weekend that Andre Anthony's coming back and Neil Farrell is also coming back. So that means the entire starting defensive line, Andre Anthony, Ali Gay, Neil Farrell, and Glenn Logan are coming back. The problem is Glenn Logan missed some games this year to start the season, and he really did regress. He was not nearly as good this year as he was in 2019. Obviously, playing in a 3-man front and a 4-man front are two completely different things. But Glenn Logan has NFL potential. We just need to see it. And as you can tell here, Brooks Cabuena, the updated list of players who have decided to return: Glenn Logan, Andre Anthony, Neil Farrell, and Ali Gay, your starting defensive line. And the center of your offensive line, Ed Ingram, Chasen Hines, and Liam Shanahan. And then you go down here, obviously Jabril Cox leaving, Zach Van Rosenberg, we did a video on that yesterday, Arik Gilbert, Racey McMath, and Torrey Carter. But is Arik Gilbert leaving? He deleted his transfer portal tweet. I don't know. I'm tired of following that story. But nevertheless, this is where we are right now as far as LSU roster retention is concerned. And as you can see here, Brooks, that's considerable retention for Ed Orgeron, who, we explained in the story, was facing a major roster management problem with a significant number of players left. So obviously at the end of the season, as many of you know, LSU barely had enough scholarship players to dress out. According to the pandemic rules, you had to have at least 53. So as many players as they get back, it's important because seniors don't count against your 85 scholarships. Or in LSU's case, 81 because of the self-imposed infraction. So every starter you get back that's also a senior, that's even bigger because they don't count against your total scholarship count. Here's a good point from Shea Dixon. At least 17 of the 22 starters are back. We still got to hear from Austin Deculus. We still have to hear from Dare Rosenthal. Both of them have NFL potential, but neither one of them are high draft picks per se. So it's a good thing that Ed Orgeron was able to retain the roster, because this idea that there were major locker room issues, that may be true, but so far Ed Orgeron has fixed it, because if there were locker room issues, a lot of these players would have transferred. But on the other end of that, would they really transfer? That means that they would have to go to another school, a school more than likely that doesn't have the same appeal and prestige as LSU. The likelihood of a player transferring, if they're a junior or senior, is still very unlikely. And part of the reason why these players are coming back is that, well, they don't have good NFL draft grades. Notice the players who have good NFL draft grades, like a Jabril Cox, is taking that leap. Like a Terrace Marshall is taking that leap. So obviously it's different, because if these guys were good enough to go to the NFL, if they had better seasons than they had, they would have taken that leap. With that said, overall, it is still a really good thing that LSU is bringing back a ton of experience, something that they didn't have going into this season because of all the departures from the 2019 team. Let's have a discussion down below. Obviously, 3 different stories: offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and obviously this roster management discussion. And to round things off here, our boy Jeff Grimes is not coming. He was hired by Dave Aranda and Baylor, so that obviously stinks. I think Jeff Grimes would have been a great fit, especially considering LSU's offensive line issues. But still, you could still see our offensive coordinator piece and defensive coordinator piece down below. Links to all our recent videos you could find in the description. Or, of course, you could just click the Power Hour LSU insignia and boom, shakalaka. There you go. It is Power Hour LSU. Boom! Ooh, we got some leftover salmon tonight. We still slamming, baby. Let's go.